Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 66th Think Tank, where we brainstorm lots of RPG ideas about monsters, settings, and whatever else crosses our mind. Tonight, we're going to be looking at unique or legendary magic items. So, we're not interested in your normal sort of +1 swords and that sort of routine off-the-shelf stuff. We're going to be talking about those really incredible, legendary artifact type magic items. So things with a distinct history and do something special within the game. So we're going to come to that in a couple of minutes, but first off, I'm going to hand over to Alex to do some check-ins.
Yep, so with the chickens, I think, and we'll start with me and make my way left as I see it. So this week, not been up to too much, sort of doing bits around work. I sent Chris a few bits on 66 Galaxy to look over, and yeah, not actually been that active a week for me. I've been kind of slacking off, I think. But pass it on to Patrick and see what he's up to.
Hi. Well, I've spent my week basically. As some of you know, my computer had a full system hardware crash, and I've had to basically replace it from the ground up. So my week has been spent trying to recover kind of some old information and rewriting what was lost. So yeah, that's been my week.
Oops. So the other good thing you've managed to get something up and running again, just in time for the meeting. Yeah. Jay, how has your week been?
Very stressful, very tired. The project I'm working on has run into significant difficulties. We're about £5 million over budget and about a year behind schedule. So it's a bit tense in the project office right now because people are basically trying to work out how the hell control essentially was lost of various key parts of the management process. And now we ended up in what can be described as a very large hole we're currently in. So it's a bit tense at work. I'm getting on fine with the stuff I'm doing. It's just there are a lot of angry people who are very stressed around me. So I'm just doing my best to help out here and there.
Yeah, sounds a bit dramatic over there. So Chris, what have you been doing this week?
This week, work-wise, I've been sort of getting ready for launching the books on RPG Now, Drive-Through RPG. So I've basically been putting together the sales pages and things like that for all of those. So hopefully they'll be on sale on RPG Now. Probably, I'm planning sort of like a week on Monday. That's sort of like the target launch date. And in other news, I've spent a lot of the week looking at roofs because our roof developed a leak, so I've been having people in to come and replace it because we've got a flat roof on part of a house. So yeah, so roofs and sales copy has been my week.
Cool. So I think with all those check-ins done, we will pass over to Jay so we can go through our suggestions for legendary and unique magic items.
Indeed, thank you, Alex, for the check-in. So, last week we were talking about legendary buildings, legendary items, legendary locations, essentially, the kind of landmarks that make up the core fabric of a magic world. Well, as a backup to that, what we started thinking about, okay, let's start thinking about what legendary unique items. Now, previously on 66 Think Tank, we've done a fair bit of talking about mundane items and mundane spells. What we're looking for here is big, special, and flashy. We want large-scale items that are basically we've got stuck in and we've had a really good time looking at it. Now, to give you an example, one of the things we popped up with last week was an idea that Alex came up with his Compass Crag, was the idea of what we essentially nicknamed the world map, which is actually a map of the world, but you can write on it. And thus you essentially had the power to adjust and settle these kind of things. So that's the kind of legendary items, kind of the scale I think we want to do. So I'm just going to pick randomly and go, Chris, what have you got for us?
Thank you, Jay, for that warning. Yes, what have I got for you? Yeah, my magical item, or items, is for 7 soul spheres of Jamba. Now, the Council of Jamba were ruled over a large kingdom of about 1 million people, and they considered themselves wise and just, and they even the simplest little issue of governance, they would take days deciding it. Considering deep philosophical questions and how they apply to, who should be able to graze their sheep where. They were legendary for it. And to aid them in their considerations, they created these 7 magical spheres. Because what they wanted to do was be able to see questions from other people's points of view, so that it allows them the wisdom, so you can, walk a mile in another man's shoes, sorts of philosophy. So they had these spheres created, which allowed them to take on different aspects of personality, common personality traits like selfishness and things like that, and help them make decisions. Unfortunately, they didn't really think this through, and instead of just choosing all the nice sort of personality traits, they chose some nice ones and some unpleasant ones, and consequently they started having arguments. Arguments eventually led to open civil war, and their whole society collapsed, and these 7 spheres were lost and scattered around the lands. But they weren't destroyed. And every now and again, one of these spheres resurfaces. But because they just look like ordinary pearls, and it's quite hard to actually detect what they're magical, they often just are in common usage. They're in jewelry and things like that. So people often have them without knowing about them. So that's the magic item. And the plot hook I thought about how it could be used is if someone who's quite nice, maybe a good cleric type, has acquired one of these spheres, but it's for something unpleasant. Maybe they're selfish, maybe they're cruel, and so suddenly you see this personality shift from as a nice person, and if they're in a position of power, then that could have all sorts of ramifications, and players have to get involved, somehow work out what's happening, and get this sphere off this person without actually harming them, because in a sense they're not being themselves. So that was sort of the item and the plot hook I thought up.
Yeah. So what kind of let's give we've got a little, slightly fewer of us this evening. Let's dig a little bit into the mechanics of 66 so that people can get a better idea. How would you imagine this bit of kit working in game?
Well, like any sort of item, it was just going to be a sort of normal, mundane piece of equipment, but it'd be tied to it. So you'd have one sphere. Let's pick the soul advantage. So basically, when you have this sphere, you have it's equivalent of having an extra soul advantage, so the player can use it. It's even more useful because it has a free keyword, so the player can use it for free. So whenever applicable, they can use this soul advantage within the game. So basically, an extra d6 on certain actions. However, once you've got this sphere, you can't use any other soul advantages without incurring a penalty. So it will you resist. It's a hazard in the game terms. It will add to the resistance if you try to use any other soul advantages. So naturally, the player is going to be forced to use one soul advantage an awful lot. And if you've got something unpleasant, then you can role play out all the consequences of that.
I can imagine that would benefit a character who's stated themselves up in body and mind and not got a lot of soul advantages. But like you say, if you find a negative emotion one, that could cause some problems. Patrick's got a question for you.
Does something happen if you bring all 7 together? Because they all have distinct advantages. They all have distinct personalities. No, not summon a wish dragon, Alex. If you bring them all together, do they will you have conflicting personalities, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't considered what would happen if you had 2 of them.
Yeah, if you've got more than one.
Yeah, and that's actually quite an interesting thing. Maybe someone accidentally acquires several of them. They're all in a nice necklace, and they're just some sort of, schizophrenic, personality shifting. Maybe multiple personalities evolve, and it could get very strange, especially if you've got some nice ones in there.
Yeah, on that thought, Alex, you have a quick and a ping.
Yeah, the quick was just getting all seven. Perhaps you get all seven to come together, they actually form some kind of being by themselves, some kind of homunculus type thing. The other thing, each of the pearls sort of gain their own personalities, they're sort of aligned with these different philosophies. Do you start getting into sort of the almost the horror side of things, where it's someone's own mind and personality being overwritten by the power of these pearls?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. You could end up significantly in trouble if you had too many of these things, because it would essentially start driving you mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a cursed magic item in some respects, and yeah, I mean, especially if the player's got a nice one first, and then sort of came across another one, and thought, oh, we'll snaffle that up, not really realizing the sort of potential danger. So, yeah, it could be interesting.
Yep, cool. All right. Anyone else got any more for Chris's Pearls of Madness? Cool. All right. In that case, I'm going to shuffle on to Pat.
Hello. I've got 3. I'm not sure which one I want to do, so I'll read the 3 titles and you tell me which one you prefer. I've got the Anti-Stress Orb, Frozen Time, and the Bastard Sword. That's air commas.
Yeah. Tell me about the Frozen Time, Pat.
Okay. Well, legend has it, or not legend, because this item exists. Sorry, this item exists, therefore it must have come from somewhere. But there's a place in the north where it's so cold that time freezes. Time itself goes to a liquid state and then goes to a solid state. Occasionally, very brave wizards go out there with lots of spells to kind of keep them alive through the harsh conditions and then the things like this, and they bring back a chunk of frozen time. Now, much like back in the old days when they had to kind of mail ice from Boston, you have to have a really big piece of time because it's got a very, very low melting point. So, like, as soon as you bring it out to sub-zero temperatures, it starts to melt. By the time you get it back to civilized land, you've got about yay much, which is about an hour's worth of time. And then you can put that in a special kind of time-sealed bottle and let out a little bit whenever you need it. I just thought it was a really fun idea.
That does interesting. I do like that. I can imagine you could have a fair amount of fun at games because essentially, yeah, I mean, it immediately becomes the precious item or a MacGuffin that someone could be fighting over. That's a nice one. Though Chris has a quick question.
Yeah, I was thinking, what do you actually do with this time? Can you sort of rewind time? Sort of step out of time to do something? Buy you 5 minutes while everyone else is standing around doing nothing.
Well, I'm not sure. My first thought was that it would reverse time for a little bit. Like you can go, oh, I made a mistake, a big mistake. Zip, go back a little bit and say a different word or a different phrase. But the idea that you can freeze time as well is it doesn't sound like too. Perhaps it's it's all based on how you decant it. If you decant it a certain way, you will zip a little bit back in time. If you decant it another way, you will get 5 minutes of personal time where everything else is kind of stuck, and you can do a kind of Zach Morris timeout and run around changing things and causing all sorts of trouble. Very useful for rogues if it can do that.
Yes, because you can imagine it being sold in very small droplets, which you just basically crush between your fingers, and it gives you 5 seconds of time. So it would be an expensive item, but you'd crush it and you get an entire round to yourself. So that mechanically that could work quite well as an expendable resource. That's not bad. Chris.
Yeah, I just thought, I like the idea you can do tiny, tiny little bits, and that would just give you extra potential, because that's effectively how we model time, or personal time within the system, is how much potential you have. So you pop this thing, and you get a certain amount of potential back, which then, of course, in return allows you to do more actions. So that's how I would model it. I'm not sure how you'd do a big one, because if you wanted to sort of like, say, rewind the game around, how many people know exactly what state their character was in a round ago? So that might get a little bit difficult to play out mechanically.
Well, I think one you'd be able to use for narrative. I don't think you'd be able to use it for thing. You could just say, because you have to decant it in a certain way, you can't decant it in that way during combat. You can only do that during narrative. There was something I thought. Yeah, you could use it to just get yourself an extra sneaky turn when no one else gets a turn as well.
Yeah. And Alex, you've got one on global warming.
Yeah, just sort of was more saying like just as a method to get to what if you start getting stuff like that and you get like bergs of this frozen time falling away from where it is and drifting around and causing weird time issues. So maybe you start getting ghost ship stuff happening because some ships are being caught out of time by strange time bergs coming by.
I really like the idea of a time berg. Literally, just you're sailing in a northern latitude or an Arctic kind of latitude, and you see this several other icebergs, and this kind of weird purple one goes past, and the sea is going backwards around it, and everyone goes, "We're not getting anywhere near that." Why? You do not want to know what happens. Why? Well, mostly it turns this wooden boat back into a tree. And you've got one on freak weather as well, Chris?
Yes, I just like going from the global warming idea. I just thought, well, when it's really cold, time freezes and distills. What happens if like a storm front from sort of like the North Pole actually comes down south? You get once every 1,000-year storm, and it's really cold around civilized lands, so time starts freezing around or where people are. You might get really weird bits, in some places like you get some rain and some wind in a storm. You get some bits which are going forward in time, some bits which are going backwards in time, and you could generate a really, bizarre sort of little mini scenario just dealing with the effects of weird time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pat, one on farming? I'm assuming this is gathering the stuff. Microphone, Pat.
Sorry, hardware muted. Actually, I was thinking it was based on what Chris was saying, which is why I used it as a quick rather than a ping. You can use it if you know when there was good weather for growing a certain type of crop, and you were like a farming commission or something like that. You could kind of use it to keep it at that season all year round, so you could produce more of a crop or something. So if you had a famine, we'd better buy some time and go back to when we didn't have all this drought.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, that could be a larger scale one. Is you give the heroes a mission to they need to gather enough of this stuff so we can send one person back and tell us, actually, you really should have planted this crop because currently there is a blight and we're all starving.
Or you could, sorry.
Well, with the quick, you got convenience and luxury, Alex.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of because we've done a lot on magic convenience. You could probably have this as a luxury convenience of using these little bits of frozen time to basically refrigerate stuff. So your sort of rich merchant can basically use it to keep any sort of luxury foods he wants just perfectly preserved.
And finally, Pat, on stealing for yourself.
Stealing from yourself. You have your frozen time in your one hand, but oh no, you've run out of rations. So you go back to last night and you walk into your own camp and you steal your own rations from yourself and eat them tomorrow. That probably causes a time paradox, but it's it'll pull a Bill and Ted. Create a party made entirely out of yourself from different periods in your life.
I can see this being quite a complicated bit of kit, so you'd have to be very careful about how much you could do with large amounts of it.
It could be a bit OP.
But yeah, otherwise it could get really kind of weird. Okay, Alex, what have you got for us in terms of legendary items?
I have got something kind of lifted from something else. So once we got group, this is the Limber Ale, which sort of, in the language of the guy who made it, means a spell engine. So created by a mage 400 years ago, the Limber Ale, or spell engine in the language of its maker, is a drum the size of a wine barrel, consisting of a number of spinning rings marked with the runes of magic. One spins the rings till the desired runes line up, channeling a flow of mana and casting the spell. So one history bit is that so the device was a proof of concept, so the first step towards a great artifice, but soon after being made, the mage who made it vanished. So it's rumored he was either killed by the Sorcerer King or abducted to finish his work under supervision. So for plot hook wise, you can have the players themselves finding it and making use of it, or a foe could have done so and they need to stop them from having it. Or they could find the plans and decide they're going to build a replica of it. Or even if you can find the abandoned lair of the Sorcerer King, you could find the Limber Ale core, a massive room-sized version that has massive potential power and stuff. So either the players can do with it, or again, stop someone else from controlling it.
Yeah. That's it. What kind of thing would you imagine this is basically just an item that boosts magic effects, essentially?
Sure, it was kind of made for a system where magic was kind of slow to cast. It was basically, it was a speed cast magic, and almost a magical computer type thing.
Okay, I can imagine, yeah, so you could potentially put keywords on it that would allow you to speed up a casting time, for example. So if you spend potential on using this bit of equipment, then you can reduce the casting times and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's potentially quite an interesting bit of kit. Chris, any ideas on what other mechanics we could put on it?
My thought, just on what Alex was saying, was the thing actually casts the spell. Doesn't necessarily speed it up, but it means you can cast any spell. So if you know the right rune combinations, you can cast any spell in the system. And possibly with the room-sized one, it has significant, has extra keywords for area and range and things like that. But to sort of make the item manageable in the system, what you could say is actually the difficult bit is actually finding out which combination of runes and stuff you need for a particular spell. So that
Also, a particularly easy one to use in combat to make the normal version of it.
Yeah, so if anything, when the characters discover this for the first time, every time they want to do a new spell, maybe they have to take some sort of extended action to study it and experiment with the thing. So that sort of acts as a sort of like break on the players abusing it. So you make that difficult so that it takes time for them to learn it. But once they learn it, they've basically got an extra spell in their repertoire they can drop very quickly.
Yeah. An instruction manual for the thing?
Yeah, well, you could have that as the focus of your quest. You find the thing, and you're like, "Well, we found the Lin barrel, the Limberial. Oh, okay. We don't know how to use it." But then an old kind of greybeard comes up to you and goes, "Ah, there's an instruction manual for this. It lies yonder beneath the Grey Rock Mountains." So not only do you have to lug this thing halfway across the world, being attacked by orcs and dragons and all kinds of stuff like that, just to find the instructions for how it works.
Yeah, that works. I'm going to chip in with the idea of you could, if you wanted to spend a lot of time, if this was going to be a quite a strong item you wanted them to use rather than just a MacGuffin, you could have a fair bit of fun with giving them the actual rune contents on the rings on the inside of it, if depending on how many you wanted to do. And then you could get the players involved in looking at the runes. I mean, Chris has done this a bit with Road to Petra plug, giving you runes.
The really weird rune that the players have to learn the magic system to be able to cast the spells.
Yeah, so you give them runes that are slightly a little bit off simple words that you could easily string together. But through looking at their impressions and their meanings, you could string together. So actually, if we string these three together and add this power keyword, we can turn that man into a goat. But if we string these ones together and do this, we turn that goat into a man. So lets them have a bit more fun. But also you put some combinations in that lead directly to spells that already exist in the system. So I think that's quite nice. I do like that as an idea. And Chris, obviously, it may not work first time all the time.
Yeah, I think if you're sort of learning by doing and experimentation, you've got a wonderful scope for the GM either throwing comic effects in, accidentally turning one of the players into a goat, or actually sort of something really bad happening. And that might be the sort of plot point is that yeah, this item is great, but if you tweak it the wrong way, you accidentally demolish your own city. So it's sort of it's just too dangerous to use in some respects.
Yeah, I mean, particularly if you screw the wrong command in it, rather than just not doing anything, it starts randomly blasting energy out because essentially you've spun it up with a load of power keywords and not tell it where to direct. Patrick, Lost People.
I just like the idea that you turn it on one time and just all that happens is a bloke appears in front of you, goes, what, what, and then sort of disappears. Like can have random magical effects if you don't line it up right.
Yes, it just starts doing really bizarre things. You see, a man in a trilby in a pinstripe suit appears before you, looks puzzled, and then vanishes again. It's like, what? What's going on? Well, you misaligned it. Got it stuck a bit on the summon between helper and posh. So yeah, you can imagine you could have quite a lot of fun with an item like that. And like I say, it's got the potential to be something the players could really get stuck into, and they would actually value the item itself. Plays a jaunty tune, indeed. So that brings it round to my turn, and I also have a selection, so I'm going to do what Patrick did and let you pick. So the three items I've got are the Sand Staff. Yes, I did another thing for the Desert Elves. The Key of the Greater Guardsman, and the Ugly Stick.
I just want to hear the ugly stick.
Yeah,
Okay, the Ugly Stick. Some mages are just horrible people. The Archwitch Rubre became increasingly better as she aged, but the elves of which she lived always seemed to be beautiful and handsome. Unable to mentally cope with her mortality, she created a wand that would allow her to sap the beauty of another to restore her own appearance. At first she used it subtly and carefully so that no one would notice. Eventually she grew too greedy and nearly killed an elven princess. The Wood Elves promptly executed her, but her wand remains in the elven archives. It appears as a perfectly straight, plain whitewood wand when not touched. When held, it distorts and discolors to mimic the physical imperfections of whoever holds it. And that's the Ugly Stick. It's a stick that makes people ugly.
I like that because it is one of those sort of, to a certain definition, useless magic items, but absolutely sort of like lots of plot hooks. For the right person, it really sort of helps, especially if it sort of like only temporarily gives you the appearance of somebody. So you whack them and you draw a day's worth of looking good, and you have that sort of addiction problem with it.
Very much so. Alex, you got an idea how you could potentially use it in combat?
I've made a little thing. If you sort of hit someone with the ugly stick and then suddenly, oh god, they're hunchbacked or something, and that distracts them for a couple of rounds.
Yeah, they're basically so hideous I can't even look at myself as some kind of hazard or status effect.
I'd imagine
You've got a
potential attack.
Yes, a potential attack. So you basically, if you disfigure someone enough, then they will actually start having to struggle moving around. Patrick, does it give vitality?
Yeah, almost conversely to what we just said. Like being kind of good looking and young is a thing. It implies a level of physical health. So if you're like a very old person, like this witch was, and you go, oh, I'm going to touch this beautiful young elf, boink. Do you just become looking like her, or do you have her physical vitality as well?
Yeah. The idea in terms of the mechanic I had was that you would point it at someone, and if you rolled better than the CP of one of their appearance-based cards, one of their appearance-based advantages, you would then get that advantage, and by default it would last a scene. And depending on how well you beat the roll, it might last for longer. So if they offer up no resistance and you're just trying to seal the CP4 beauty advantage, and you get a roll of 18 or something like that, then you don't steal it for a scene or a session. You maybe even steal it for a day or a week. And it basically, they lose it exactly like they would normally if they'd taken damage. and you gain a status effect advantage of the same name.
That makes sense. I just liked the idea of you touching somebody with it, and they look like an old lady, but they're still kind of agile and nimble as a young scamp, and can climb trees, jump over fences.
Yeah, the idea, it basically transfers appearance of cards around. Yes, very much so, Chris. Actually, on that, Chris, do you think that mechanic is feasible?
Yeah, on the time aspect, mechanically, the way it would have to work is the player would have to say how long they want it to last, and that adds to resistance. So by default, it would be a scene. If they wanted it to last a session, that becomes an extra 2d6 of resistance, 4d6 if it's a day, 8d6 if they want a week. But it effectively does what you say, because it gets harder to do the longer they want it. So the net effect is the same. If you know you can easily get someone, you go for a longer time period.
Yeah, so you basically find someone who's stupid and pretty. I mean, yeah, the worst thing you could do is try and attack a good-looking mage, because they would immediately just blast that off you, and you'd end up having essentially, yeah, okay, well, turns out, well, this person knows magic, and now I'm in one hell of a fight. Yeah, so it's the kind of thing I quite liked about the Ugly Stick. Is it just ultimately it doesn't necessarily do a lot, because it only moves around appearance-based advantages. But if your character is particularly desperate for that advantage to solve some kind of problem, having that ability could work. In terms of plot hooks, the best I had really, where I had a few ideas, the outright plot hook to make it a MacGuffin, someone vain wants you to steal it for them. But there are a couple other questions I thought on the writing the story. Firstly, why haven't the elves destroyed it? Why is it still in their archives? Nominally, elves wouldn't necessarily be interested in doing it. And the other one I had was, what happened to the princess that the Archwitch nearly killed? Did she recover? So there's potential little tricks in there. And Chris, on the idea of life and damage?
Yeah, so just a thought on the mechanical side of things is that one advantage of taking the advantage off another person is that you do have a life card. And if you have a life advantage, you can sacrifice it for damage. So if you go around dobbing a lot of people and stealing a lot of appearance from people, you can actually have a huge amount of temporary hit points. And one mechanic you could use is that the person only gets their advantage back when the wand holder has lost it due to taking damage. So that was sort of like change it, because it made them quite hard to kill as well.
Yeah, potential. Interesting. Chris? Sorry, not Chris. Alex, detecting morality?
You got in the description that when held, the staff itself distorts and discolors to mimic the physical imperfections of whomever holds it. There's a way if you almost get some kind of paladin order type thing that use it to sort of root out any immoral souls or whatever, or the people within their own organization, by making them touch the staff and see what happens to it.
That's an interesting idea, actually. Yes. Or particularly, I mean, on at the lowest level, you could basically use it to say, well, we only want pretty people as allowed in this building, so you have to hold this. It turns out you're an ugly person, so you're not allowed in. But yeah, if it also reflected inner beauty in some way, then perhaps you could use it like that. But I think ultimately I had my idea on the lines that it would be, it's created by someone who is superficially interested in beauty. So I think it only reflects your outward physical beauty. And you got an idea for a plot hook, Chris?
Yeah, I like this question about why have they kept the wand and what happened to the princess and things like that. And it occurred to me, well, maybe when you tap someone with it, you do actually take their physical appearance on. So that it's sort of like a disguise as much as anything else. And I wondered whether, well, perhaps the witch was a lot cleverer than we thought, and maybe she's actually replaced herself with the queen. So she's taken on the appearance of the queen, and actually maybe it was the queen who got executed.
So yeah, that kind of shapeshifter or twist one. It's like you're still beautiful. Actually, the one has on a more powerful thing. You could cause an awful lot more havoc on it. So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, I had a few ideas on that. So yeah, I think it's worked quite well. So we've got a good set of extra little bits and pieces there. I'll say for those watching, what will happen, Pat and I have mentioned that we've got some other items that we've not had a chance to talk about. So in that case, what we're going to be doing is what you'll find is Chris will put up a blog post later containing this YouTube video, this presentation, this talk, this think tank, and you'll also find in the comments of that, we'll also format up and tidy up the notes of the items we didn't mention, so you can go and have a read of those. And with that, I'm going to call time on our magical legendary items and shuffle the chairmanship of this meeting over to Chris to talk about how we're going to plan ahead.
Yes. This week we've obviously done unique and legendary. I've lost my ability to speak. This week we've obviously done unique and legendary magic items. And what we had planned for next week and the week after were sort of putting together some basic ideas for a completely new setting. We're going to look at some post-apocalyptic stuff. So what sorts of apocalypses do we have? And then the week after that, we're going to be talking about, in that post-apocalyptic world, what are the sources of conflict and danger which drive the adventures and characters in that world. However, we don't have anything planned for 2 weeks after that, and we're trying to keep 4 weeks ahead. So really what we need to do is think of 2 things to put on the list of brainstorming topics. So these can be things, current writing projects we've got on, just stuff off the top of our heads, or just stuff we're interested in. Jay?
Yeah, just stuff interesting in. Mark and I are getting to the point now where we're going to be getting stuck into the campaign. Well, making good progress in doing the editing of 66 and Hellenic and getting it ready. But while this may not be something we will do immediately, it would be interesting to see if we could get the group to brainstorm other campaigns we could do for 66 Hellenic. Get an idea of what the group thinks would make good multi-episodic stories for 66 Hellenic. Some big style epic things that people could get stuck into. I would introduce it by setting up the kind of thing that we've already done with the first new legend, which we'll have to work out how much, with the first new legend that's going to be coming with the 66 Hellenic close to release. But a few more campaign ideas that we could maybe roll out later on would be something I would be interested in. Yeah, as Pat's mentioned there, the arrival of the Romans, we've got plenty of foreign human powers that we could get involved in, and we could start getting stuck in and throwing different pantheons at each other, as an example.
That seems like a great idea, so I'm going to bung it onto the list for the 14th of November. Seems that's the next available things. Yeah, epic stories, epic Greek stories the characters could embark on is what we're looking for there. So we'll think of some catchy title and obviously share that out in due course. Which still leaves us with one more slot we need to fill. Anyone got any thoughts on topics? Pat, I think you're gesturing.
I've got my Inhumanity Paths that I thought we were going to do a think tank on, and it makes sense to do it sooner rather than later because that way I can write it all up,
Yes, obviously with these things, anything which is actually a writing project and directly useful to a writer goes up the list. So we can do that as early as next week if you want, or leave it a couple of weeks. Entirely your call.
Plan for next week.
Yeah, but it's only a sort of vague topic. It's not going to impact on anyone's work, so therefore it's less important than something which is actually going to help you.
Yeah, well, the way I see it, the earlier we get them down pat, the earlier we can play test them. So next week would be good if that's okay.
Oh, that's brilliant. In which case, yes, we will we'll shuffle everything around, and so Inhumanity. So give us a quick idea of what that's about.
Okay. Well, if anyone was watching the playtests, you'll know this, but I'll just explain anyway. The mechanic for how madness works it's not exactly madness in 66 Lovecraft. We have an Inhumanity stat, which is transferred into Inhumanity cards, ways of becoming less human, either psychologically or physically or spiritually. So, and these have paths. Now, at the moment, what I've got is a kind of placeholder, which is a single inhumanity path with a bunch of little cards in it, which I will share out to people so they can have a look and see kind of what the idea is. But we need paths. We need straight paths with a path card and 9 hazards which are in that path. They don't have to be what's the word? They don't have to be like entirely detrimental. They can be beneficial in some ways, but they should be at least in one aspect detrimental.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, well, that sounds good. I think we can all get thinking about that, and obviously I'll send out emails to everybody to brief them properly. Okay, so great. We've got a plan for the next 4 weeks then. And so let's move on. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to do the pluses and deltas.
Okay, I'm self-conscious about it now. That's Jay's fault. It's actually Jay. You've already done your. We'll go to you, Jay, first. Jay, what are your pluses and deltas since you've already?
My plus is that I really enjoyed having a good meeting. I think it's quite nice that we, with the landmarks we did last week, we were able to mostly talking about ideas and stories. The nice thing about the magic items, we're also able to start getting a bit stuck into the mechanics as well, which really helps in that it allows us to have a better understanding and communicate more with our listeners and readers and viewers even about the kind of stuff we're doing. So the more we can just neatly trickle in and talk to them about, well, actually this is how 66 work, then we can bring the think tank more back to 66. And the delta is that during the warm-up and the pre-meeting that people didn't see, Patrick's mic was really high up, and it just looked, I couldn't work out what it was for a bit, and he was kind of speaking into it directly, and it just looked, yes, like that. That was wrong. So that was my delta.
Well, fine. Okay, we'll do mine next. My plus is only a little thing, and it's only a little thing. But the plus is in the little test bar, we were using ping and quick correctly. Last week, everybody was just doing quick, and it got a bit confusing when you were looking at the bar. And I'm glad I wasn't running the meeting then. Deltas. I keep forgetting that my mic is hardware muted rather than software muted. I mean, it's caused some troubles. Chris, next.
Yes. Good ideas. I think actually, in some respects, having less of us this week, we were actually able to look at the ideas in more depth and talk about some of the ideas and the mechanics. So yeah, I like the fact we got quite in depth on some of those ideas. Delta, we rather screwed up the whole social media side this week, which is partly my fault because I forgot to do something and seemed not to go out on other social media stuff. So we will do better this week, I think. We will double our efforts.
Okay, and finally, Alex.
Yeah, pluses. Seeing some good items here, and I like the fact that there's a couple of them that you could almost seem so well integrated you could just build campaigns around them. Deltas, they're small turnout, but like Chris said, it actually did mean we could get through quite a bit for each one. And I really only had one somewhat unfitting idea that I kind of just threw in there.
Okay, well, that was everyone's pluses and deltas. We'll hand over to Chris for the sign-off.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, so that has been the meeting. Thank you everybody for some great ideas, as we mentioned earlier. Next week we're going to be looking at Lovecraft and thinking about ways to become less human as nasty things happen to characters. So that's the topic for next week's discussion. If you've got your own ideas for legendary or unique magic items, then please post them either on the comments here on YouTube or on the blog post when it goes out, or on into social media where we're going to post it. We definitely are going to post it this week. Because we'd love to hear your ideas, and we'll do a roundup of them next week. One other thing, if you subscribe to our channel, you'll get these videos to your desk automatically as well. So always subscribe to us. It's a good idea. But that's it. I think we're done. It's now about 8 o'clock. We are back, hopefully, with a playtest in about half an hour, and also back next week with more think tanks. So until then, goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.